Thank you, Sarah and Tim and Kathleen. So it is early March 2020, and I am at Costco, and it is packed. And I'm trying to decide, along with several dozen other people, how many pounds of rice to buy in bulk, and whether we need beans or olive oil, and what really constitutes a staple in my household, and just how many weeks' worth of food I should buy, and how much toilet paper is enough toilet paper, and how much is greedy, and how much is excessive. Were any of you in this position? I'm in this giant warehouse space, and I'm trying to wrap my head around the idea of supply chains and just how interconnected we are, and whether or not this will all be over in a few weeks or longer than that. Do you remember those early days, friends? I remember being so unsure of how it all would play out. How contagious was this virus? How did it transmit? Was it on surfaces, in the air? Would it be safe to go grocery shopping in the coming weeks? How much could we risk going out in public? Would food chains be interrupted by the shutdown? To what extent? What exactly were we preparing for? And in those days, I remember, we just had no idea. We were trying to prepare for something when we had no idea what was coming, no idea what we were preparing for. And so I, like many people, took the best guess I could, and it might have been over-preparing in retrospect, but we couldn't have known that at the time. And so we bought a lot of food. Can you remember being in those early days? How did you try to prepare? Did you have an imagining then of what you were preparing for? I'm thinking about preparing right now because we are in the midst of the Christian season of Advent, a time set aside for waiting for and preparing for the upcoming birth of Jesus. And Jesus, the Christian tradition teaches, is God choosing to come into the world as a poor, immigrant, vulnerable human baby. And Jesus' life held great promise according to Christian scripture. His life, the symbol of God's love and salvation, a word which, remember, simply means healing. And for me, as a Unitarian Universalist, I understand Jesus to be fully human, a human who had the spark of the divine inside of him, just as we all do. A human who embodied God's love and justice so beautifully and profoundly and radically that the empire took notice. And though I believe that no human, divine or otherwise, will save us, I do know that I am hoping for and anticipating and preparing for a world that is not here yet. Some of the not here yetness is personal, the ever-present uncertainty that is just the state of being human, not knowing for sure how the future will unfold. And some of that not here yetness is longing for the kind of world that I want to live in, a world that holds more love and healing, a world with more justice, more heaven here on earth. Advent tells us, and we heard in our offertory anthem today, that the world is about to turn. And sometimes the world turns in big ways, in ways we never could have expected, like global pandemics, or wars, or uprisings. And sometimes our worlds turn in ways that are more personal, more individual. Divorces and deaths and births, moves and jobs and new relationships. And in a way, isn't the world always about to turn? It seems like no matter how many times I learn the lesson that change is constant, I still so often feel unprepared for it, and I fight against it. And I wonder, how should we prepare for a world that is not here yet, for lives that we are not yet living? This month, like every December, I am doing so much preparing. Buying presents and getting a Christmas tree, setting up the snow village, baking treats, planning for our pageant here at church next Sunday, for our candlelight Christmas Eve service. And it strikes me that so many of our beloved traditions of the season are about preparing, are about leading up to the holiday as much or more so than the holiday itself. There is so much in Advent about waiting, anticipating, but there's also this undercurrent of preparing. Prepare him room, we say, telling us to make room for the holy, for love to enter our lives. And it's not simply passive. Wait, and the world will turn, but it also calls us to action. Prepare, for the world is about to turn. And what does it mean to do that? How am I living into embodying my anticipation, my hopes and my fears? Isn't one of the lessons in Advent, in Christmas, about making room for the holy, for love, for the stranger, for the unknown that becomes a blessing and not a curse? So why does my relationship to preparing for the future sometimes feel way less hopeful and way more fearful? Why do we say to prepare for the worst and hope for the best? Why do I never prepare for the best? It took my household months to eat through all of the extra food we had bought. My partner's household is still, like this week, eating through the dried beans they bought in March of 2020. And while it certainly didn't take us nearly that long to go through all of the extra toilet paper in my household of 6 people, I really didn't need all that rice. And I noticed this funny paradox when we're preparing for something, because we can only ever guess at what we will need in the future. It's not until I've returned from a trip that I realize what was overpacking and what was needed, right? But I think about what we really did need in retrospect in those early days of COVID. What we really needed more than the rice, more than the olive oil, was patience, as we had so many conversations about COVID precautions and risk management and ever-changing CDC guidelines and city guidelines and COVID household norms and mask agreements. And we needed care for ourselves and for each other as routines were disrupted, as isolation took a toll on our mental health, and courage as we lived in the midst of uncertainty, as my household sent essential workers to work in the emergency department, at the grocery store, on the farm. And connection, as we all retreated into our homes, into our COVID bubbles, and we gathered in Zoom or in parks. And we needed commitment to flattening the curve, to demonstrating our care for one another by staying home. And we needed hope that vaccines would come soon and that science would give us some answers and some treatment and some direction. It is so much easier to over-prepare with logistics, buying too much food, for instance, when we don't know what's ahead. And I wonder, in this world that is always changing, when we don't know what's on the horizon, when we don't have control, when we want to be prepared for the worst, even as we hope for the best, what do we really need to be prepared in the face of uncertainty, in the face of change and unknowing? Because I think that while we do things like make contingency plans and pack extra layers and save for retirement and buy too much food in bulk, what we also need are spiritual tools: faith and courage and kindness and hope and beauty and tenderness and relationships of care and connection and support and love that will carry us through the turning of the world and the changes in our lives. As will likely be unsurprising to most of you, I am a bit of a chronic overpacker. I'm an overpreparer, a worrier, a contingency planner. I will bring extra layers and water and snacks for a 45-minute walk around the neighborhood. But every once in a while, I have gotten caught in the rain, without an umbrella or a rain jacket. You know those midsummer sudden downpours where it's warm and humid and the skies just open up? My experience of getting surprised in those moments can really go either way. Sometimes it is miserable. Sometimes I just don't have shoes on that I care to get wet. I am not close enough to home to change. I'm just a tiny bit too cold, or more likely, I'm just in a bad mood. And I think about those times when I've gotten caught in the rain unprepared, and I've been delighted by the surprise, given up on trying to stay dry, and in those moments I've had fun companions. I've been able to be fully present, trusting that I would be able to dry off soon, so I might as well enjoy the experience. I've leaned into playfulness, jumping into puddles with kids, and laughing at how ridiculous it all is. Now, obviously, being unprepared is rarely as innocuous as getting caught in a rainstorm, and sometimes being unprepared has disastrous consequences. But often I've found myself in moments where I've been unprepared that my experience of changed plans or of surprises depends more on what's going on inside of me than outside. Do I respond with cursing all of the ways in which I should have seen this coming, remembered a raincoat, checked the weather? Or do I respond with the sense of, I have what I need, I'll be okay, good companions and a sense of playfulness and that shrug of recognition of I'm not in control, and the ability to be present to the rainstorm and find the beauty and joy within it? Friends, as we lean into this Advent season, I wonder, what is it that you are anticipating in this world that is always changing? And how are you preparing the way for it? What are the spiritual muscles, as we talked about earlier, that you need to strengthen in order to greet the world, the turning of the world, and the changes in our lives? What are the practices and who are the people who help you to strengthen them? Are you in need right now of patience or connection or courage or companionship, care, resilience, hope, trust, faith? And what are the practices that help you to prepare to greet a future that we cannot fully predict and cannot fully control? Is it time for quiet, journaling, therapy, gratitude practices, meditation, reading, talking with friends, going on walks, coming to church, singing, prayer? I love this idea that I came across several years ago when we can't map out how everything is going to unfold, that we can only do the next right thing. The next right thing is often as far down the path as we can see, but it is a decision made in groundedness, faithfulness to our values, commitment, and courage. And we can prepare to do the next right thing by strengthening those things that ground us, by doing those things that connect us to our values and help us to discern what the next right thing is. Perhaps the next right thing is showing up to work for justice even if you cannot see the arc of the universe bending that way. Perhaps the next right thing is changing jobs or transferring schools or leaving a relationship that you have outgrown, even if the change scares us. Perhaps the next right thing is taking a stand or taking a knee even when you are the only one. Or perhaps the next right thing is having that conversation even if you don't know where it will go after that. Whatever the next right thing is, it calls to us and asks us to draw on resources deep within. It asks us to draw on things that we cannot put into a backpack and we cannot pick up from Costco. Friends, may we use this season of waiting, of anticipating, to prepare, to strengthen those muscles that let us live into the unknowing, and then to do the next right thing. As we anticipate, sometimes with hope, and sometimes with fear, and sometimes with a bit of both, a world that is always turning. May we use this time to prepare room for the holy to enter into the midst of it all, and for love to find us. May it be so, and amen.